All right, I welcome you all to the fourth seminar of the second phase of International PhD in Progress weekly seminar series organized by the Global South Network. Allow me to introduce today's panel. I'm Dr. Nauman Reayat. I'm a lecturer in law at the School of Law, University of Leicester. My research interests lie in constitutional law and politics. And I am the convener of the Global South Network, the person who have been in touch with almost all of you who are in the attendees list and in the panels. I'm joined by Dr. Diane, Levine, Assistant Professor, School of Criminology, University of Leicester, and Visiting Research Associate, Center of Social Development, University of Johannesburg. Her research is focused on understanding the ways in which children and adolescents survive and thrive when life is challenging, particularly in a digital world and in relation to addressing child abuse, neglect, maltreatment, and child protection. I'm joined by Sonia, Cruz, Davila, who is the peer commentator for this session. She completed her doctoral degree in law research at the Dixon Poon School of Law, King's College London. And Sonia researches about a particular way in which a head of government may abuse her power, namely by making decisions and performing acts unilaterally. She is interested in the relationship between this form of abuse of power and phenomena like demagogy, paternalism, and populism, and would like to continue her research in that direction. Last but not the least, our today's speaker, our guest is Mary Adeyemo, who is Doctor of Philosophy candidate, School of Law, University of Oxford, and is also qualified to practice as a barrister and solicitor in Nigeria. In today's session, she will present her paper on Nurse Muyiwa, the Apprenticeship of Nursing and Midwifery in Nigeria, the gateway to unprecedented deaths. Mary, you have 25 minutes for the presentation, which will be followed by 5 minutes for comments, questions of discussant and peer commentator, and 15 minutes of question and answer session by attendees. The floor is now yours. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nauman and Sonia, and the professor who is also chairing today, and for everyone for attending, taking time to attend today's session. My name again is Mary Adeyemo, and I am a research law student at the University of Oxford, and I'm also a lawyer, like rightly mentioned, and I'm generally interested in medical law, medical negligence, medical malpractice, particularly the intersection between law, medicine, and artificial intelligence. And so today I will be presenting my working paper, which I have titled Nurse Muyiwa, the Apprenticeship of Nursing and Midwifery Practice in Nigeria, the Gateway to Unprecedented Deaths. And so in this presentation, again, I apologize that I'm unable to share my slides. I don't know why. I guess that's a technical issue, but I'm going to continue nonetheless. So today's presentation, I'll be giving you a brief background to the nursing practice and midwifery practice in Nigeria, and we're telling you the significance of this research and some of the gaps I have identified in literature, as well as the main argument for my research and my proposal for us to adopt a blockchain approach to mitigating some of these gaps and what policymakers in Nigeria and similar countries can adopt. Oh, I think, can you please stop sharing the slide? I think you have the wrong one. I think I sent the wrong one. I'll just use the one that I have. Yes.
You sent the wrong one?
Yes.
All right. Okay. No problem. I will stop sharing.
Thank you.
Here you go.
I'm happy to share the slide consequently after the presentation if people
yeah, cool. No problem.
Have the slide. So the background to nursing practice, I think, is essential for me to inform us that nursing practice and midwifery practice are not necessarily known to the Nigerian people before the influx of missionaries in Nigeria. So missionaries who were in Nigeria before the pre-colonial times, as part of their message of Christianity to preach Jesus to the people, thought it wise to sort of incorporate nursing and providing free medical services to members of the community in 1846 in the pre-colonial Nigeria. And as a result of how people sort of, accepted them into these communities, they thought it was wise to move to other parts of the country. And I should reference that in 1847, Mary Slessor, who is very popular in Nigeria for wonderful deeds, was sent by the Church of Scotland to Calabar, where she stopped the killing of twins in the communities in Calabar. Again, because of how the demand for medical care of the people was expanding, they needed the support of people, of women and men, to be able to, complement some of the services they were rendering to the people at the time in Nigeria. And because of this growing demand, then there became a formalized training of people to become certified nurses to practice in Nigeria at the time. And as such, in 1957, we had the PTS, that's the preliminary training school for people who were interested in the practice of nursing. And again, because of the way Nigeria is structured, it's a highly cultural and traditional society. There were, series of women not being entitled to go to school because they were women, and their functions were just limited to, home functions. But again, in 1962, we had the establishment of the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, which is still in existence till today, where people were formally trained to acquire the knowledge of nursing and midwifery practice. And at the time, if you become trained, or if you get trained by LUTH, that's the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, you automatically get a British license and diploma to practice nursing in Nigeria. And a series of all of these institutionalization formed the blueprint of nursing practice in Nigeria. I should also state that in today's Nigeria, there are two ways to become a nurse. It's either you go through the nursing school route, which is becoming less and less popular, or you go to a university and maybe for 5 years acquire the BSc in nursing and do a 1-year internship before you can be certified to be a nurse in Nigeria. Again, because of this formalization and institutionalization of the nursing practice, we found out that more and more people are unable to get enrolled in nursing schools or even get formal training and education to practice nursing because of the expenses, because of the politicalization or the bureaucracies that are involved in getting into nursing school. So the question now is, where are we in Nigeria today? It might interest you to know that Nigeria is the most populous Black nation in the world, with over 250 million people. And despite that population, we only have 250,000 registered nurses in Nigeria. This shows a deficit in the numbers of available nurses to meet the growing population and demand in the healthcare sector. Again, this problem has been further exacerbated by the migration of nurses to other parts of the world to seek greener pastures, or for education, or for whatsoever reason it might be. Data shows that Nigerian registered nurses account for the third highest population of nurses in the United Kingdom. This shows again how more people are continuously migrating from Nigeria to other parts of the world, reducing the supply to meet the growing demand for nurses in Nigeria. Particularly in 2018, the data shows that over 2,796 registered Nigerian nurses migrated to the UK, and this number increased to over 3,021 in 2019. And in the heat of the COVID in 2020 in Nigeria during the lockdown, we had over 3,684 Nigerian registered nurses migrate to the UK. And when we thought it was over, it was just getting started. And in 2021, over 4,310 Nigerian registered nurses migrated to the UK. And just last year, over 7,256 nurses migrated to the UK. And as of March 31, 2023, we have over 10,639 Nigerian registered nurses who are now practicing in the UK, just using the UK as an example. Again, this shows a deficit in the numbers of available nurses in Nigeria to meet the growing population. It might also interest you to know that the World Health Organization states that the nurse to patient ratio should be a maximum of 1 nurse to 5 patients. But in Nigeria today, the nurse to patient ratio is 1 nurse to over 1,600 patients. This again shows that there is a deficit in the numbers of available nurses in Nigeria to meet the growing demand and the population. So the question then is, what is Nurse Muyiwa, and how should we and why should we be interested on who Nurse Muyiwa is? First and foremost, Muyiwa is a Yoruba term that means bring that. Yoruba is a language that is widely spoken by the southwestern parts of Nigeria and also spoken in other countries like Ghana, like Cuba, like Brazil, just to mention a few. And so Nurse Muyiwa literally is a lingo that is used amongst members of the society for nurses whose assignment is primarily to assist doctors and nurses administratively. And again, you find members of the society confusing Nurse Muyiwa and auxiliary nurses. While auxiliary nurses are recognized in the jurisdiction like the UK and in some other Western parts of the world, auxiliary nurses are actually not recognized under the Nigerian law. And so Nurse Muyiwa is not equal to nurse auxiliary nurses. Assuming without conceding that we actually even need auxiliary nurses in Nigeria, auxiliary nurses, their duties should at most be limited to, just support and administrative functions. But we find today that Nurse Muyiwas are actually stepping into the roles of nurses. So they are quack nurses who are actually sort of certified but not legally certified. So in Nigeria, carpenters, plumbers, hairdressers, vulcanizers learn the art of training without any need for any formal certification or formal education. You can just walk up to anyone who says, well, I'm a certified carpenter and I can teach you. And so that's what we now find in the nursing industry, where people just walk up to anyone who owes themselves out as being trained or experienced in the nursing practice. They acquire this just the basic things about the physical parts of the body. They don't really know the anatomy or the physiology of the body. They don't really know a lot of science that goes on behind what we can all see, and this has led to an escalation of medical negligence practices in Nigeria, medical negligence incidences in Nigeria, rather. I should also say that Section 21 of the Nigerian Nursing and Midwifery Act although criminalizes the act of teaching people without formal certification, or people who owe themselves out as nurses, whether auxiliary nurse or whatever kind of language they choose to use, the law criminalizes it, but unfortunately, the criminal liability is not it's not so firm to impair people. So like I said, Section 21 of the Nursing and Midwifery Act says that if you are found guilty by any court other than the High Court, you may be entitled to go to imprisonment for a maximum of 6 months and with the option of 1,000 naira as fine. And today, 1,000 naira is less than $1 in Nigeria. So let's assume, without considering that someone has even been found guilty, the only criminal liability for their action is that they pay less than $1 to be free, right? So the law itself is sort of weak in terms of, in mitigating the situations we have in the country now. Again, there is anecdotal evidence to suggest that Nurse Muyiwas are only found in private institutions, private medical facilities, but fortunately, we also find them in government-owned facilities. Recently, at the Isolo General Hospital, a nurse who had been practicing in the Isolo General Hospital run by the Lagos State Health Service Commission was found to have certificates that were not formally issued by the Nigerian Nursing and Midwifery Council of Nigeria. Again, just last year in Rivers State, in the south part of Nigeria, a nurse was arrested who holds herself out as a nurse, and she performed a surgical operation on a patient who actually died. Most importantly, in the court, in the Supreme Court, we've seen the case of Jumbo and State. In the case of Jumbo and State, a clerical worker who had previously worked in a pharmaceutical outfit had acquired, the basic knowledge by hand of nursing, and she helped a woman give birth, and the woman, she was bleeding excessively, and the Jumbo thought, oh, I think the best thing for me to do is to give this woman ergomethrine of 0.5 milligram. And because of that medication that was administered, the woman kept jerking till she died. Although at the High Court, Jumbo was found negligent and liable, but at the Court of Appeal said the state did not prove beyond reasonable doubt, and so Jumbo became a free man. And because the issue before the court was not whether the Jumbo is registered to practice nursing or not to practice nursing. And so these are some of the legal loopholes we found in the law, because again, the law doesn't cover all of this, and the law is not even sophisticated enough to be able to cater for the larger and the growing population. Most importantly, the most recent case of a Nigerian popular Afrobeat star whose name is Ilerioluwa Promise Oloba, is a very popular guy known as Mohbad, who died 35 days ago. Based on the preliminary investigations by the Nigerian police force, it was alluded that he died based on the injection he had received from a nurse. Again, the nurse, based on the press report that was released on September 22, 2023 by the National Association of Nursing and Midwifery Council in Nigeria, said that based on their preliminary investigation, the said nurse Fumi Ogedengbe, is not a registered nurse, right? So imagine Mohbad is a popular Afrobeat star who has just died based on receiving an injection from a nurse, Muyiwa. And so these are some of the issues that we currently experience in the Nigerian nursing practice. And so what are my major findings? My major findings are that there is a critical shortage of qualified and licensed nurses who are practicing in Nigeria. And because of this shortage, there is an emergence of nurse Muyiwas who are illegally and unauthorized to, they're illegal set of nurses, and they are not authorized to practice. And because they are growing in their population, it's actually poses a great threat to the right to life of people and to the health and quality of healthcare patients, receive. Again, based on research, we found out that the quality of patient care is highly linked to the quality of nurse staffing in most countries. Furthermore, there is a deficiency, like I have highlighted, in the regulatory oversight of nursing practice in Nigeria. So the regulation is not so firm because, again, many Nigerians do not pay attention to nurses. There is an argument that doctors are more superior to nurses. So most of the research you'll find are research that talks about medical negligence of doctors and very less medical negligence of nurses. So what are the literature gaps in research? I've identified some of them. Another one is there's a lack of extensive research and analysis regarding the presence of nurse Muyiwas in Nigeria. And so not much research has been done on nursing, not much research has been linked to nurse Muyiwas and their impact in the healthcare system in Nigeria. Again, there is little or no research in terms of how the cumbersome process of obtaining formal and skilled training also impacts the emergence of nurse Muyiwas in Nigeria and overall on the healthcare system. So what's the main and the central argument of this working paper? The central argument of my working paper is there is a vacuum to be filled, and the only way the population or many registered nurses or even members of the society have sought to fill this vacuum is to trust nurse Muyiwas. And again, we find out that in the Nigerian society, once we find someone putting on a beautiful white gown, pinafore gown with a boat-shaped cap, we assume they are nurses, even if they are actually not qualified or licensed to practice. So what is my proposal? I'm proposing that given this issue, there is a need for the regulators to have a more centralized approach in regulation of nursing practice in Nigeria. If you want to register a company in Nigeria, you can just go to the CAC website, that's the Corporate Affairs Commission website, to check, just do a public search. Whereas if you want to check nurses, there's no way, there is no formal or centralized system where you can go to validate if a nurse is actually qualified or licensed to practice in Nigeria. So there's a need for us to have a centralized portal or a centralized system that documents, puts the data of nurses that are registered and qualified to practice in Nigeria. There's also a need for continuous verification, validation, and revalidation of credentials integrated into this system, so we can monitor in real time people who should not be practicing or people who are not qualified to practice. Again, there is a need to sort of stiffen the provisions of the law in terms of the repercussions for people who are on the provisions of the law. If you're not a nurse, you are not a nurse. In Nigeria, the Nigerian law does not recognize auxiliary nursing. So it's either you're a nurse or you're not a nurse. And if these people are found wanting, action should be taken against them. So it serves as a deterrence to other people who are also applying that route. Again, you find out that based on some research, because of how cheap and affordable auxiliary nurses are, or nurse Muyiwas or nurse Eliza, some other people will call them quack nurses generally, they are very easy to get into the healthcare system. They are cheap, they are affordable, and so it's again pushing out real and qualified nurses out of the market. Whilst other countries, especially the Western world, whilst they are enjoying some of the benefits, from our nurses that are qualified in Nigeria and even in the global South generally, we see that it's creating a downturn in the health and the impact it's having on, the members of the society in the global South. So there is a need for us to actually pay keen attention to the regulation of nursing practices in not just Nigeria, but generally in the global South. I'm happy to welcome contributions, additions, subtractions, questions that you might have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you for adding, I had no idea about the topic, but, such a rich information you have added to my knowledge. I will now invite Dr. Diane to share her thoughts, comments on the topic. Diane, over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Mary. That was absolutely fascinating. I was not aware of most of those things. I know I've learned a great deal of new concepts and ideas, and I've had new thoughts provoked, and I'm sure that that's true for others in this virtual room too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of share three things that have sprung to mind as you've been speaking, and in response to your abstract. There are some questions blocked all the way through, and I'm happy to kind of repeat those at the end. But if you kind of let me have my stream of thought, and then perhaps we could have a bit of conversation after that, would that be all right?
Sure, please.
Fab. Okay, so I'm very interested in the kind of relationships or the interplays between the concepts that you raise in your talk and in your paper. So first, there's something for me around the naming of things and the way that the names underpin ideas of qualification in the Nigerian context, and then obviously more globally. As you've absolutely correctly pointed out, we're very used to minority world framings of qualification, and these are tied in with generations and generations of, well, we might generously call them archetypes, you know, as you mentioned, the nurse with a particular hat and the beautiful white dress. At worst, stereotypes, ideas of what a nurse is. So I suppose my first question is, being very provocative, is there an opportunity here for Nigeria to lead the way, giant of Africa, isn't it, to lead the way in building a new archetype of a form of practitioner who sits within the medical space, so not a medical practitioner, but rather a practitioner who works within medical spaces that we haven't seen before? Because there is obviously a need for people who can provide these sort of particular types of support and care. You know, you've talked a lot obviously about the supply and demand issues, and of course those exist in other parts of sub-Saharan Africa too. So I think, you know, it would be interesting to know if there's a brand new type of practitioner that could be created, and if so, how do we create boundaries, legal and socio-legal boundaries around this new type of practitioner so that their remit can be valued but also limited for the sake of patient safety? And I think you've made the need for that limitation to be kind of abundantly clear. My second question is around the idea of careers, and I don't know if you're familiar with Becker's contested and, one might argue, quite problematic work on smokers and how one learns to become a smoker. And I'm interested in how you become a nurse Muyiwa. So, you know, what is the career pathway? Have they emerged from the role of caregiving of a family member? I mean, I don't know if it's the case in Nigeria, but certainly in other places, Zimbabwe and Kenya and South Africa and other places where I've worked, you know, sometimes because of the lack of volume of professional qualified people, a lot of caregiving can fall to family members, particularly in more rural areas. So is there some kind of career pathway? Do these people automatically end up becoming nurse muyiwas, or are they more likely to come from maybe traditional healing backgrounds? So is there a career pathway in the style of Becker's kind of problematic work on smokers' careers and learning to be a smoker that we could perhaps learn from, that would enable us to target intervention earlier so that we're not ending up in the situation where people are, you know, you turn around and somebody is suddenly a midwife, or somebody is suddenly a, you know, a matron and a senior nurse, and actually have no qualifications or no deep qualifications that we might rely on for more conventional medical interventions. And then my third point is around your ways forward. So your abstract proposes quite a kind of stark solution, and I'm interested in whether your work so far has unpicked whether this might have some unintended consequences. So, for example, you mentioned that the legislation is already there to kind of begin to sanction the training of people who might become nurse muyiwas. But would making the entire process entirely illegal raise some socioeconomic issues at family levels? I mean, I'm assuming these people are being paid. I'm not sure what the kind of financial pathways are there, but are we likely to see for their families some quite serious socioeconomic challenges? And also then, so that's at the family level, but then also, you know, you've absolutely correctly explained the workforce supply issues at the national levels. Would it exacerbate those? So given that, you know, perhaps a binary approach might have some problematic outcomes at various levels, would it be possible to have some kind of intervention that happens earlier on in the process if we understood the career? I don't know very much about alternative justice systems in the Nigerian setting, but, you know, is there almost like a diversion program that could be devised that would, you know, again, at an early stage, target people who might be entering problematic pathways, career pathways, and enable them to kind of train into an appropriate setting, take, proper account of both the need of the setting, but also the cultural orientations in situ, the issues around coloniality and the impact of coloniality, but also has appropriate regulatory and career development structures, and obviously crucially protects patients. So I would be very interested to know whether such a magical solution might be found. But thank you so much for an absolutely fascinating talk that was provocative in all the right ways. So those were my kind of initial thoughts. I see people are popping questions thick and fast into the chat. So Nauman, I'm not sure if you would it be helpful perhaps if Mary initially responded and then we can ask some questions?
Mary, what would you like to do? I mean, first, should we collect comments and questions from Sonia and others, and then you would like to respond together, or you want to respond to Diane's comment first and then move to others?
I think because the questions are quite many, I think I should just deal with Dan's questions first.
All right. Okay, go ahead, please.
Selfish, but yay.
Thank you very much for your comment and for the questions. And the first question on boundary creation, like I said, the Nigerian law does not in any way recognize auxiliary nursing, unlike the UK where we have assisted nurses, right? And so if I'm not totally saying that we should just put an end to nurse Muyiwas in the Nigerian sector, because of course there is a growing deficit in the demand to supply ratio. So what I'm saying is we can do something that is currently being done in the UK and other parts of the world. So even if you're not a registered nurse in the UK, if you're a nursing assistant, you still have to be registered. You still have to go through a formal sort of training that is approved by the government. And so again, this is just a way of reducing, if not totally eradicating the incidences of medical negligence. So what I'm proposing to policymakers in Nigeria is, see, we don't need to abolish totally auxiliary nursing or nurse Muyiwas, because we really need them. These are people who have shown interest in nursing practice and for whatsoever reason, including economic and social factors, unable to proceed to nursing school. So we can use them, we can train them formally, we can certify them, we can also sort of, introduce them into the nursing practice. That's what is being done in the UK. So people who have not gone to the university, but they have A levels or some degree higher but lower to the undergraduate degree, are recruited as assistant nurses. So that's what I'm proposing for the boundary creation, but we need to regulate it. So
do you think actually not using the word nurse about these people would be a helpful thing? That actually we have a term that's specific to the Nigerian context that comes from the Nigerian need, and actually we're not going to use this word nurse at all in relation to these people, because that, in a sense, it stops that automatic assumption or automatic association with the white dress and a particular status in society, etc.
I mean, I think with language in Nigeria, language is a big deal. So someone who works in bank is a banker, even if you're just a security man at the bank or you're just a teller man at the bank. So I mean, we may need to change the language and we need to educate the public, but we really need to educate people who are actually involved in this nursing practice. Again, because just like how we work, nobody comes, to the world with their knowledge that they have. They keep on, practice makes perfect, right? And so there are people who have been nurse Muyiwas for 40 years, and they sort of, in their experience, they use their leverage experience to treat people, and they've seen maybe much more cases than someone who is just graduating from nursing school or who has a nursing degree. And so we may need to change the name or change the status, but much more, we need to change the mind and understanding of the community, so we know who is a nurse and who is not a nurse. And the fact that someone is wearing a pinafore white gown or pink gown with a boat-shaped cap doesn't make them a nurse.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. I won't I could just talk about this all day with you. It's absolutely fascinating, but I will keep quiet now because I can see Asmahan's got a question actually relating to the white dress and the boat-shaped cap, actually, on the gender side.
Yeah. I think your second question is about career pathways. How do you become a nurse Muyiwa in Nigeria? Like I said, it's just like how artisans, carpenters, plumbers, organizers become carpenters in Nigeria, there's no formal institutionalized way. So most people typically go to experienced nurses who might also be nurse Muyiwa, or people who have actually been licensed to practice nursing in Nigeria, or even doctors. Like I said, it's cheaper, it's easier, there's no formal requirement. So people who either fail out of secondary school, which is, WAEC, which is the equivalent of IGCSE in the UK, whether you fail or you pass, you're admitted to. There's no requirements. Whether you go to school, whether you've been to school, you just need basic understanding of English. In some communities, you don't even need to be able to speak English. You just need to be able to speak the language of that community. So
is there any, there's jumps as well, isn't there, in Nigeria? So is there a kind of an interim qualification that would come between WIAC and a degree, almost like an apprenticeship, we would call it here? Is there an option for that?
We don't have the apprenticeship system in Nigeria. So when you're done with your secondary school, your high school, it's like you go to university or you go to nursing school. And it's either you're in the formal sector or you're in the informal sector. And if you're in the informal sector, the government really looks at you to see if you're doing anything, because even the formal sector is yet to be formally regulated.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I don't know if there are other questions.
I think, as I say, I could basically take the whole lot. So I'm going to keep quiet now and hand over to Aspahan, who's the next question, I think.
Yeah, I think Asman, if I leave it to you to explain the question. I mean, the question is a bit general. I mean, if Mary can understand, fine, but if she cannot, so I will leave it to you to explain the question to Mary.
Right. So let me just add a little bit to what Dee and Mary were discussing. When we consider, can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
My voice. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. When we consider our society in Africa generally, we have what we call the skilled workers layers. So when, for example, here when we talk in the health sectors, we have a lot of different skills with the different names and brands and recruitment and so on. There, when we talk about nursing, we're including the assistant social workers, assistant care workers, and everything else. They're all being called nurses. That's why probably, while we don't have a very kind of a formal requirement or education qualifications that a person has to have them before they can kind of been admitted to do the course, then people, they can call themselves nurses while they're just assistant care workers. So we have the whole kind of a group of workers who probably they have to work in a different levels. This is kind of my understanding on how things are. I'm from that part of the sub-Saharan Africa, and we have that kind of issues that we don't have that like a skill specifications. So nurses are just nurses, regardless of what level of nursing are you working on. So the society is not yet stratified as it is here in relation to the level of skills and other things. However, I don't see that it's a problem in one hand, and it's not a problem on the other hand, because these are very two distinct society with a very different social bonds, social relationship, and how people live together. So we don't, for example, in Africa, we don't really need people like social care workers and all that kind of things, who are the kind of auxiliary to nursing, because of the layout of the society. If you open a care home in a village in Nigeria or somewhere else, you'll not even get the client. But here it's kind of a very popular mode of living and caring for others. So that could lead to a different kind of element of how probably the whole health sectors is working differently to UK or any other advanced society, if we can call them so. So these are very distinct societies, which probably they are not kind of having a very similar model of healthcare and all kind of things. I'm not from a healthcare kind of background, but I just explain it from my experience. I can imagine just opening the care home in somewhere in Africa and employ those what we call auxiliary nurses and the care workers and all that kind of things, so that a part of nursing probably will not flourish as it is in this part of the world. Go back to my question. I was just asking in Nigeria, particularly, whether male and female have the kind of same opportunity to nursing career, how that has been kind of constructed or perceived in the society. A male have kind of the same interest as female, because even here we find it's like a female career, and I'm not sure how is it in Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question and for your contribution earlier. I mean, because like I said, it's a highly traditional and customary society. Women are seen naturally as care providers and home groomers. You find more women in the nursing careers than men. And so even in hospitals, even when a man is a nurse, they always just assume he's a doctor, even when he corrects that he's a nurse. And when a woman is a doctor, they address her as because of psychological makeup. So more than always find more women in nursing practice than men, because women are seen as homemakers and home builders, and should just, like I said, that's why there is some sort of inferiority in terms of the career ladders. So doctors are seen as more superior to nurses, and that's why you find more and many research on medical negligence by medical practitioners as opposed to medical negligence by nursing practitioners.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you, Mary. So let's go to Sonia, our peer commentator, for her comments. Sonia, over to you.
Yeah, hello, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I think much of what I was thinking about has already been mentioned to a certain extent. But yeah, so I think I was mainly interested in your proposal, which is what you mentioned in the last part of your abstract, which is kind of like the solutions that you would recommend. And as this was also mentioned by Diane earlier on, you seem to focus, at least in the abstract, you seem to focus on this kind of criminalization approach to the problem. But because of what you already mentioned, it seems like it's not necessarily exclusively a criminal approach that you would take. So that's what was something that I wanted to ask, and maybe you can say a little bit more about that, because of course there's a huge kind of socio-economic context that needs to be considered. And as is mentioned in your presentation and in your abstract, just the shortage of medical practitioners in Nigeria. So it seems it at least, I mean, from a position of ignorance, it seems intuitively, for me at least, that an kind of efficient approach in a way is simply to well, not simply, but to try to train these people who are already in the profession, and to try precisely to create these schemes of proper apprenticeships, so that these Muyiwa nurses can actually serve as auxiliary nurses, or as it's mentioned also in the chat, as support workers to a certain extent. I think part of the issue, as you mentioned also in your abstracts, is probably that the government hasn't done enough actually to deter these kind of practices, just from the mere fact that these nurses are in government-owned facilities, as you mentioned. So there hasn't been a proper deterrence from the government itself. So I think, yeah, I don't know if these deterrence would come necessarily from a criminalization perspective, as I was saying, but maybe is something also, I mean, that is of course cultural and is related as well to the gender roles, and just the idea maybe that because nursing is a female profession, it doesn't really require like professional training, it's just something that women are able to do. So probably doesn't require a proper training. So yeah, it's also related to these cultural views that you mentioned. So maybe like taking all that into account, maybe the question could be, is there any of these aspects that you would rather focus on your research, or is it a social legal research that aims at kind of focusing on all of them at the same time? I don't know if you have any preference in that respect. Yeah, thank you.
Sonia, for your comment. I should say that the criminal aspect is just to show how weak the current legal regime is. So again, pointing out why people find it less bothering, why people are less bothered, to go into it, because again, the criminal liability is something that they can walk over and they can deal with. And so the solution really is not just to be retributive in nature. The solution is in restorative justice, to say where can we go from here. It's rather than just punishing people. Yes, we can have a criminal provision or laws that put punishment on people as a form of deterrence, but much more we need to look at how we can restore the society back to sanity. And so I'm looking at how we are not just criminalizing them, but also sort of incorporating them into the system. So we make them they're not nurses, but we sort of make them assistants or healthcare providers or something within that nature to sort of pursue, encourage them, so much so that with being in that line of practice, they can then even go for further training to become registered nurses.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I didn't want to abuse my role as the chair or the convener, but I have a comment to make, and I think that is related to your last comment when you were talking about the importance for the Global South. I think you rightly mentioned that it's relevant to other jurisdictions as well. And sharing my own experience of distant past, I came across a case where there was one person selling the medicine. He started just a business of selling medicines, not a pharmacist, not a doctor, but over time he acquired this experience of making prescriptions, and people were satisfied. That was the most surprising thing. People were satisfied, and to cut the long story short, the business was very successful. And suddenly he became a doctor and people started giving him a doctor. And he was very busy, and busy than even the registered doctors. And then formally the registered doctor, one of the registered doctor filed a complaint that reached to the court. And the shop was shut down, but people continued to visit him at his home and continue to seek the advice and the services. And which actually gave a very important question, the question about legitimacy and how did it affect the legal system, why people do not trust the legal regimes, and that lack of trust actually, motivate them to believe and, keep on engaging with these actors and indirectly strengthen this informal mechanisms, within the field of medicine and pharmacy. So yes, by and large, the pattern is quite relevant to other jurisdictions as well. And I'm sure the same goes for India and other South Asian countries. And I'm not sure about the Latin America and other jurisdiction, but yes. Mary, this was just a comment. I mean, I was not asking a question, but there's a question from Antele. If you would like to respond to that. She's asking, will your research consider proposing healthcare support workers as an alternative to auxiliary nurse, accompanied by regulatory measures aimed at preventing individuals like Muyiwas from engaging in nursing practices?
Yes, very much. Thank you, Numa, for your contribution and then for the question. Yes, I think the paper at the end, long run is proposing for us to actually incorporate these people into, the nursing cadre so that we are able to actually maximize them to sort of fill the deficit. Because again, the problem here is not that they are not willing. The problem here is that they don't have the requisite information and knowledge to be able to help as much as they can in the healthcare system. So we, instead of them being trained privately or just by hand, we want to train them formally so they know the anatomy and physiology of nursing practice. Again, I have experiences with family members who have become paralyzed on one leg or a hand because of an injection they received from a nurse Muyiwa, who just think, oh, injection is just about stabbing, just inject anywhere, and that has led to paralysis for them, like lifelong damage. So it's not that they're not willing, but we should sort of incorporate them, sort of not make them nurses, but sort of use this talent well within the society. And again, on the long run, reducing the cost of education and training to acquire this knowledge. Yes, thank you again for the question.
Thank you very much. I think Sonia has got an additional question. So Sonia, over to you. You have 2 minutes, okay? We are short of time.
Yeah, I think Gabriel might want to ask maybe.
All right. Okay, so let's first go to the Gabriel, because you are part of the panel, so you have already commented. Gabriel, over to you.
Thank you, Nauman. First of all, just to say a big congratulations to Mary. Mary is actually my classmate, and I'm very happy listening to her today.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one comment to make. You mentioned something about when you were starting your presentation about the socio-cultural problems in Nigeria that has given rise to the situation of having very less number of people in the nursing practice in Nigeria. For example, the problem of bureaucracy and training, and also the problem of cost. I think, or do you not think that through the formalization of the training of nurse Muyiwas in Nigeria, that could also raise its ugly head in your research? Are you thinking about whether or how it is possible to make their training be less bureaucratic in such a way that those who don't have enough money to access the normal nursing training will be able to access that? Because if that problem is transferred to the training of nurse Muyiwas, the same problems that was encountered in the context of training of nurses will also be transferred to that. So what do you have to say about that?
Thank you for that, Gabriel. Nice seeing you again after a very long time. I think for the training of nurse Muyiwas, my approach is not that they become formalized or institutionalized as we already have for nurses and for people who go through the nursing school route or through the university route. And so just like in the UK, what you just need is your IGCSE A levels, just to have like a training. It could be a year-long training. Sometimes it could be just for a couple of months, depending on where you are. So the idea is not to have people go through 3 years or 4 years or make it as corporate or as tedious as the already established nursing practices. The idea is just to sort of form a benchmark of people who practice as nurse Muyiwa. So we have a record of them and we are able to know, okay, this person is a nurse Muyiwa or an assistant healthcare provider or whatever they are, whatever nomenclature or name we decide to give them. So we are not going to go through the bureaucratic process already, because that's already tedious. And I don't know if I mentioned in the course of my presentation, we don't even have sufficient nursing schools in Nigeria or universities that offer nursing education or nursing training for people, for prospective nurses. So as much as in Nurse Muyiwa, what we have today is just private doctors, private nurses organizing trainings for those people for a couple of months, we should sort of institutionalize it so that it is regulated. So it's just sort of regulatory rather than forcing them into bureaucratic processes. I don't know if I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary, for such a fantastic presentation. Thank you, Sonia, thanks Sonia and Diane for comments. Thank you all for asking questions. Next week, same time, let's meet our next speaker. Emilia Oris Onyeri, PhD candidate, School of Law, University of Nottingham. She's going to talk about the economic community of West African states, navigating the barriers to trade liberalization and economic integration on 1st of November, 2 to 3 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary, and good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.